Welcome to the Babies in Business Podcast. Join your hosts, Rachel and Avram Gonzales, real-life parents and business partners. Each week on Babies in Business, Rachel and Avram create a space for entrepreneurial parents to find their own way. They'll dive into insights on topics like leadership, efficiency, self-awareness, budgeting, and human psychology as they nurture their family and build their business. Here's your hosts, Avram and Rachel.
Hey friends, we're excited to be back for another episode of the Babies in Business Podcast.
Very excited to be here, partly because I am not wearing a baby while we're recording. This is a huge monumental step for us.
Rachel's always having to try to talk around the baby or contain her breath and breathing so she's not just all up in your ears on the podcast. There's a lot of audio stuff we've been figuring out with that.
And this is the second time we're recording this because when we did record it, it was
The whole
situated
thing
on my clothes wrong because I had the baby on me and I had a blanket and I was rubbing up against the blanket the whole time. So redo take number 2.
Yeah, at least it's not like a 3-hour recording. I have a buddy of mine, Adrian, he posted the other day that he did a 2.5-hour training that he didn't realize the microphone was muted the whole time. He had to do it. Can you imagine that?
Oh, that would take my soul.
Just soul crushing, right? So anyway, we're back for round 2 and we're excited to talk about strengthening the relationship you have with your partner today because we've just been through the equivalent of 1 month of consistent scheduled date nights. And it's been amazing.
It's been so good.
And it is the inspiration for today's podcast because date night happened to be the mechanism that we've been enjoying to strengthen our relationship with each other. But in talking about it, we realized there's a lot of things that went into this that are important aspects of building a relationship. And we wanted to riff on those, take you on this little journey discussion that we had that we thought was worthwhile in the pursuit of building your relationship with your partner. Having date night for the last month straight and comparing it to not having something consistent before.
It's incredible. For the first while with new baby, with August in our family, it kind of felt like we were high-fiving in the hall because I was so tired a lot. You were with Lincoln and I needed to go take a nap. When August was napping, I was napping and there was very little time with each other. We get to the end of the day and we've put the babies down. We look over at each other and we just look like puddles melting into the couch because we just have no energy left. And especially not for each other. It's like, what do you do in those times? Mm-hmm. So having that dedicated time this last month has been so incredible.
It's like, how long could we really go having some time with each other before things just sort of start to degrade? I don't know what that timeline looks like, but I know that other couples have felt that. We've spoken before on the podcast about benign neglect. We'll talk about it a little bit more today, but it's basically the drifting apart you have with people simply because you weren't in contact. And even if you're living under the same roof, the high-fiving in the hallway is not really enough to keep a marriage together over the long term. We thought about this really great metaphor. We haven't been in our garden in a couple of years because of babies. But previous to that, we certainly loved growing some herbs and trying some other things out. And we thought a metaphor for all of this is a garden. And that a garden, if left untended, will just grow. And then you said something really brilliant about fruits and vegetables with a garden.
Yeah, I have never known a garden that just randomly sprouted a cucumber or a tomato. You have to plant those things. I have often seen weeds randomly sprout up everywhere, all over. Growing up, we had a garden, a big garden. And I remember having to weed the garden. Oh my gosh, what a tedious task. But it was that or milk the cow. I chose weeding. That was great. So yeah, so a garden, if you're not planting the seeds, you're not actually going to get the rewards, that fruit that you would desire. You're going to get weeds. And in a relationship, what is that? What could that be? Could that be less patient with each other? Maybe frustration. It could be you're not growing close together. Maybe your goals drift apart, things like that. Those are some of the things that could be, for me, weeds in our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're not visiting the garden on a regular basis, you don't see what's popping up. You'll miss some things, right? We watched some movie the other day where this guy, he just couldn't believe that his wife had left him. And Morgan Freeman was the other actor in the movie, and he's like, bro, there had to be signs that you missed.
I was sitting there when it happened.
Right. We'll look that movie up, maybe throw it in the show notes, because that was a really good movie. I think we'll visit again.
Right, about relationships. It was so
Mhm.
wonderful to watch.
So keeping that metaphor in mind, we realize that you can either proactively and positively add to your relationship or not.
Right.
And if you don't do it, you end up with those weeds and maybe a random assortment of flowers if you're really, really lucky.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a couple of years ago, we talked about intentionality being the one word that we had throughout the year about how we kind of went about work, life, family, relationships, all those things. And with a relationship, I chose you to be my partner for life. And if I am frustrated with you at times or whatever those feelings might be, I ask myself, is this going to get me closer to you, or is it going to make me feel further away from you? Am I going to feel good about this, or is it going to make me feel kind of icky? Am I going to be upset, but also just choosing you in those moments, in every moment? So I love date night because it's kind of having it all set up. There were a lot of different things that we had to do to get to the point of having a date night. But I've loved having the time with you this last month. Because we just haven't had the time to sometimes even finish a sentence.
Dude, one of the most aggravating things for me is that we're trying to have a conversation and then, Lincoln's running over and he wants attention and he wants to tell us what's going on.
I'm so
And he's so
excited.
excited, but like you literally can't finish sentences sometimes. It's like it's just all about him.
Exactly. And it's all a lot around like transitions. If I've left the house and I'm coming back or whatever that is, those conversations that we try to have, and then we just kind of abandon them. We don't finish them because we just don't have the time or we forget to get back to them. So date night has been really awesome. It has taken us a bit of time to get to that point. And in comparison, it's really neat to see, what it was like not having date night and now having date night. But for those of you listening that are parents and you have your own business, you also feel the pain of what we're going to talk about now is that it's not always super easy and you feel like you're spinning the plates of your relationships. You have work, you have family, you have your relationships, you have your kids, all these different things, but
You have to keep spinning them.
yeah,
You cannot leave your relationship, even if it's the most, like for us, like our relationship is the strongest part of what we have going on.
yeah,
Everything else sometimes feels like it can be a bit chaotic and go through those seasons, but like we always come back to the relationship. So that plate, you cannot leave it alone for too long.
right.
And so we play this dance, this in and out. We have some great friends, Mike and Danielle Schlichty. We actually had Mike on the podcast about a year ago. His episode, I think it's episode 16. We'll throw it in the show notes. How to attract super sick deals. It's really a great podcast about manifestation, and I think you guys will dig the forward thinking aspect of Michael on that podcast. And there's a lot of references to his partner Danielle and what they put together. Anyway, that's an episode for the show notes. But Mike and Danielle, when we first made friends with them, I remember asking, hey, do you guys want to do this or do that? And this is before we had Lincoln, right? And if it was a Tuesday night, Mike would always say, sorry, that's our date night, but we could choose a different night. And they defended that time vigorously.
Right. It was non-negotiable.
It was non-negotiable. That's the word.
They were not going to sacrifice or change their plans for something else.
And it's because they recognize what we are finally coming around to, which is you don't always get the time. And a week can go by very quickly without that time.
Oh, yeah.
And just having that carved out ahead, you always know that it's there. You never book other things on top of it. And for us right now, it's Fridays. We can get babysitting on Fridays. And our minds are ready and prepared for that time by when it comes around.
Yeah. And sometimes, for me, I've looked forward to it. It feels like a reprieve, just going out, doing something with you, having August along because he's breastfeeding. But it's really awesome to see just the simple weekly check-ins have been very motivational, but also just energy giving. I feel like I'm recharged at those times where, gosh, it's amazing when we can finish a whole sentence and not be interrupted. So that's really, really awesome. For us though, like you mentioned, we had a couple of things that we had to plan ahead in order to actually make this happen. And some of these were roadblocks for us before. That's why it's not happened sooner.
And at times, and we'll talk about this, it's almost felt like, well, is it really worth all this effort?
Yes. I've absolutely felt myself ask that question. There was like 2 weeks ago that we made it out later to our date, still worked, We had scheduled an oil change that day. It went long. We were like an hour-ish into our date night time already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we kind of looked at each other and were like, yeah, our plans aren't going to happen. And so we chose ease and connection as opposed to keeping those plans. We chose to go somewhere else here on our side of town, that kind of stuff. So we pivoted a little bit. But talking about some of the things that we do and had to plan in order to get to the point of having a weekly date night, we had to book time ahead with our babysitter, make sure that she had time and that we could have some regularity. So we schedule like a month out and make sure that that month we know which days we will have. If we're going to skip a day, maybe she's got something going on, we know about that a month ahead. So it's really nice for planning. We can plan with friends if we want to do a double date, or we could plan other specific things. So it's
real
really
block
nice.
in that was trust.
Yes.
Finding somebody that we really liked. So that was like a
Yes.
whole thing that we nabbed
Absolutely.
and figured out.
Well, and the person that does our babysitting is our nanny. So we already had someone that we really trusted with Lincoln. And then the next thing, making sure that you choose where you're going to go. Make sure that you have a plan. That should not be the thing you're talking about on your way out the door. Because for us, we have a limited amount of time. And if we wait or we delay, then we're probably not going to be able to do much of anything.
Well, let's be honest. If there's a particular activity that we're getting into, sometimes those plans need to be made well ahead of time in order for you to
Absolutely.
enjoy that. It's like it sucks when you show up and like all the spots are booked or, there's no table ready for you.
Right.
There's a lot that can go wrong
Right.
if you don't have it picked out ahead.
Yeah, and because we are on a time crunch, we got to get back so we can relieve our babysitter, and we've got a baby to put to bed. So there are things that we also have to consider. Also, just the budget, making sure that we have the money to go out, making sure that we have the money to pay a babysitter. It takes, it's a financial investment, but it's really well worth it to make sure that we have time with each other.
Well, we just kept coming back around to if we don't do it, then what? Right? And so looking at, you guys know, listening to this, we're really into budgeting and money and making our money go as far as possible. And looking at the fact that we would be hiring somebody to watch our child for like 3 hours,
Yeah.
plus going out, having a decent meal somewhere and maybe an activity, we're talking about $100-something just to go out.
Right.
And when you have a household budget, that's, $6,000, $8,000, whatever amount, $500 is a big chunk of that.
It's a big percentage.
That's a big percentage. So initially it was money. I mean, I know when we first had Lincoln, and this is only like 2.5 years ago,
Yeah.
we did not have the money to go out and do a date night like we are now
For sure.
every single week.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
Became a
when-
necessity, like the same way that we've seen the gym and talked about that.
absolutely.
Like that's what's transformed for me in the last month of consistency with it, because before we were not consistent.
Correct.
Then I'm like, yeah, like we can't go back from this. This isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity for
Right.
us.
Well, I think also kind of going back to that, the gardening metaphor, if you don't actually prep the ground for the seeds, it's not going to really grow really good or really well if you don't water it, if you don't tend it. And with a relationship, you have to actually carve out that time in your schedule. If it is hectic, you have to carve out the money for that time for you to go out and have a good time with your spouse. You have to actually do some prep work like you do for a garden. If you don't, you're going to get the weeds, plain and simple. So deciding what are those non-negotiables for you? What are those seeds you want to plant in your relationship, in your business, with your children? What are those things? And being really specific about it, making sure that you plan ahead.
Yeah. One of the things that we realized in all of this was that even if your love language isn't quality time, you absolutely need the time.
Yes.
I think when you're a business owner and you're raising babies, time is the thing that's super scarce.
Right.
So when you do have it, in a way, it feels more important. To me, it's felt more valuable, less of it, right? The time that we do have, like when we go and we take this 3 hours for a date night, it is like the most magical 3 hours of my entire week, because it's just so different than the content and the quality of the rest of the week in terms of like what we get to spend together.
Yes.
And it really doesn't take much for us to feel really filled back up again.
Absolutely. Well, I just think, you and I really love playing board games, and we have really beautiful board games. The artwork is beautiful. We actually have them displayed in our office. So we have this desk, and there's 2 shelves above where we sit with our desk, and then the games sit up there. So we get to look at some of our most favorite games. But guess what we don't get to do with those games?
We never get to play them.
We have taken them out like 2 or 3 times, and it was a massive failure. Really cute pieces. I'm thinking of this one game. It has animal characters, Everdell. It has this 3D tree that you set up. It has this board. And then you have the pebbles and the berries and the twigs and the rocks and the resin and cards. And Lincoln
wanted to touch everything.
He wanted to touch everything. And so we've not been able to take it out. We've not been able to take out most of the games that we like. So one of the things that I love most is it goes back to when you and I first met. My mom had just passed, and you had asked me to go out on a date, and we went to Slice and Dice. And for those of you that don't know that place, there are 2 locations. There's one on the east side and one on the west side.
You're in Albuquerque.
Yep, you're in Albuquerque. And we went to the west side location. It was their very first. We had some pizza, we played a board game. We actually hate the board game, funny enough, that we played. But we had a great time. And so oftentimes that's what we do on our date night is we'll go and play a game. And what's really special about it is we can finish the game. We can take out any of the games that have those pieces, and we can finish conversations. There's so many different things that take us back to the beginning of our relationship and why we chose each other. And those times are just really special. So for those of you that haven't made time for date night, please hear this. Please hear this. If you plan and you prepare and it's important enough to you, you will make time. You will carve out the money. You will do all these things to make it something that's happening. But if you're doing it, kudos to you.
Listen, when you're thinking about it and you haven't moved, it feels like it's not worth it. But once you go out and you have that time, you realize really quickly, man, should really do a lot more of this. And that's what we are urging you to do here. So whether it's date night or something else, you have to find a way to spend that quality time with your spouse so that you can build your relationship. Because the opposite will happen. If you don't tend to it, eventually it will start to degrade and you won't even notice.
Yes.
That's the scary part. You won't even notice.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose and the point of sharing with you what we have today. So we would love to hear from you, our community. We're going to post this up on social media. You can comment on the episode announcement wherever you find us, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. Or you can look out for the post that's coming later this week. The question I want to ask you is, what is your favorite activity that you've done for date night? So it could be anything. Like, is there a memorable thing that you and your spouse went and did? It could be simple. It could be extravagant. We'd love to hear all of it. We also might be looking for some recommendations for ourselves in this. So, help us out, answer the question, engage with us online. You can find us on all the major social media platforms at babiesandbizpod. You can reach out to us via email, hello@babiesandbiz.com. And make sure to go out and check the episode show notes. We always mention the resources and things that we talked about during the episode, people, books, other things. You can always find that by going to babiesandbiz.com/ the number of this episode. I don't know which one we're recording right now, so I'm not going to give you false information on accident. So check out the show notes. We'd love to hear from you guys. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap, Rachel?
It's worth it. If you have a spouse and you have a business and you have children, you will not be sad making time.
Agreed. Well, that's all for now. Thanks so much for listening into the Babies in Business podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Babies in Business podcast. Who do you know that would benefit from hearing this episode? Share it with them and post about it on social media. You can find the show notes for this episode, free downloads, and connect with the rest of the community at babiesandbiz.com. We'll see you next time.